Muy buenas tardes aquí desde el Parlamento Europeo y para nuestra sección de análisis de la Fundación FAES tenemos una personalidad muy destacada en François-Xavier Bellamy. François-Xavier Bellamy es un destacado miembro de la República. Es vicepresidente, uno de los vicepresidentes del grupo parlamentario del PP en el Parlamento Europeo y es el jefe de la delegación francesa en el PP. Además de todo eso, François-Xavier Bellamy es un hombre bien conocido como pensador político, como publicista y como ensayista. Y buena parte de su obra se encuentra ya traducida en España. Yo agradezco especialmente a François-Xavier que haya tenido la amabilidad de estar con nosotros porque se encuentra en un momento muy complicado en Francia y con una agenda muy difícil de mantener. Mantendremos esta primera conversación sobre 4 o 5 aspectos que son importantes después de las elecciones parlamentarias en Francia. François-Xavier, thank you very much for coming, and I would like to start by asking you for an overall reading of the results. In principle, it seems very simple. They say, well, it's a huge success for Mélenchon, a quite disappointing failure for Le Pen, and Macron, who can take credit for having decided to call a snap election. The cordon sanitaire has worked, and the main danger of a Le Pen government seems to be avoided. But I'm sure there is a much more nuanced analysis of the elections, and that's why I would like to hear from you.
Muchísimas gracias, Javier, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's a great honor to share these few insights with you. As you say, the situation in France is very difficult, and it was already the case even before Macron decided that he would launch this process of snap elections. In France, it was very much seen as a Sanchez bet, that he wanted to retake control over a situation that he lost because he was clearly in a minority, and this was shown by his European election, where with the 5 parties building the majority in France, he reached only 14% in the votes in the European election. At this moment, he decided that he would launch snap elections, what no one would have foreseen. The outcome is indeed a little bit nuanced because, first of all, it's not a victory for Mélenchon. Actually, the far left lost a few seats in this election. But the truth is that it was a general surprise that this alliance of the left came first in the second round of this election. They achieved in a few days only this unity of the left, which is quite shameful for the Socialist Party because they decided to unite behind the far left with the Greens under a program which would be absolutely disastrous, both for France and for Europe, of course. And we saw this strange situation where a former socialist president of the Republic, François Hollande, was running as candidate under the same banner as candidates who had been convicted with anti-Semitic speeches about the situation in Israel, for example, or people who were excusing political violence. I know that you have also this situation in Spain, that the far left, very radical, in a way driving the whole left in a terrible moral tragedy. We went through this election where a lot of observers would predict that we would disappear, while gaining a few seats, so we didn't lose our place in the National Assembly. We even increased it a little bit. And now we are in a moment where we can't know what possible coalition could be formed to run a French government tomorrow, because neither the far right nor the left, nor even the former Macronist majority have the possibility to build this kind of coalition.
That's an issue I wanted to raise because Les Républicains have shown a remarkable resilience, and I think that you deserve credit for very much of this. given the fact that you have been waging these elections in the worst possible conditions, which crisis in the leadership, while it is true that the overwhelming majority of the candidates have remained loyal to the positions that you have been defending so strongly. So I think it's important to know what is the role that the Republicans, Les Républicains, will have in this political landscape, because it seems that you will be a necessary component of any possible coalition that may be formed in France.
I think this role, to speak about it, we have to speak about two different temporalities. On the short run, we already said that we will not take part in a government. We do not require positions for ourselves. We need first to rebuild our political offer. But we are ready to keep the stability of the situation in France, and by all means to make everything possible to avoid that the left takes control over the political situation. They do not have a legitimacy for this, because even if the left alliance arrived first, they do not have a majority by themselves. So what we want to do and to say is that we are ready. If a government creates, and it's Macron's responsibility, it's the president's responsibility to appoint a government, we are ready to give our political proposals in terms of legislation on migration, security, economy, finances, and the main topics where France has so much to work on. We do not want for France 3 years to lose before 2027, where we will have the next presidential election. Then on the long run, our main task is to rebuild. Macron, in 2017, arrived in the political landscape with a very simple wording. He was explaining that the traditional governmental forces had failed, and that after this artificial, he said, debate between the left and the right, he would do now the en même temps, at the same time. He would be at the same time left and right.
That sounds familiar.
The ones who were outside of this spectrum would be only the extremists. So the new political debate would be between populist and progressive people, between the center and the extremes. And at this moment, I was already certain that this kind of scenario would lead to a rise in the extremes, in the forces who are outside this will of seriousness, truth, reason. And I know that you resisted. And for us, the PP is very much a model now in France. We have to follow this model. You also went through this crisis that touched our political forces, and you recovered. And now you are the force that is preparing the alternatives for Spain. And we are so much expecting that you will be able to give Spain the hope this country deserves, and that you will be also a strong Spanish pillar for Europe, because now we know that the policy of Sanchez is harming the whole European Union.
We want to be, and it's very important. We will talk about that later, because there is a bit of an irony in this situation in which there is an electoral campaign feeding into polarization, very strong confrontation, but then once the election has been held, the search for a moderate starts. So we have been listening to the most extreme political discourses, but then they are all looking for a moderate that could be admissible. You said, and rightly so, that the appointment of a prime minister is a main responsibility of Macron. As president of the Republic, of the French Republic, Macron retains a lot of power. But also we see the enormous complexities. They are now playing for time. And probably the Olympics and other events may help this strategy. But sooner or later he will have to face the reality and have to commit a prime minister. How much of a lame duck has Macron emerged from this election? To what extent he can control the political process, because there are still 3 years left to the next presidential election. That's quite a long time.
For sure, it will be a real moment of weakness for him in the years to come for three reasons. The first one is that the main, we will rediscover our constitution, which gives the main responsibility to the parliament. In fact, what we have a little bit forgotten, because for those who follow the constitutional situation in France, a decision was taken a few years ago to align the agenda of the National Assembly on the one of the presidential election. So since a few mandates, we had this situation where the parliament was very much the consequence of the presidential election. And then the president would have a majority which would be there because of his own success. And it gave a huge power to the president. Now, the power will get back to the National Assembly in a way. Second reason is that if we enter a situation of cohabitation, where the majority doesn't have the same political colors as the president, then it's a constant, of course, dispute on who has the responsibility of what. We see it on the European level, for example, who would appoint a commissioner for France? And there is already a debate if it is the government or if it is the president who has this responsibility. But in any case, it would weaken the president. And the final point is that, in fact, now no one, Emmanuel Macron will not be able to run for the next elections because he's already in his second mandate, so constitutionally doesn't have the right to run for a third one. And now I think that his own political camp has decided to turn a page. No one was consulted on these snap elections, and his own majority, former majority, has a clear political resentment against what he did. People who followed him, who supported him, it was not my case, feel now betrayed by a president who decided that he would send his majority in a political evident crash just because he wanted to use his constitutional power to run for snap elections.
What is sure, François, is that this situation is very challenging and very demanding for all the French political class. There's been some jokes about the Belgian handbook for coalitions and things like that. But obviously, the Les Républicains are going to distance themselves from the fate of France. They feel responsible about that and the contribution they can make to that. So this is very, very challenging for the political parties and for the political class. To what extent this is also a challenge for Rassemblement National? Or they can say, well, we lost the elections, we have nothing to do with that. That's it. It's for the Republicans, the Socialists, Mélenchon, Macron, to try to glue the pieces of the China.
But I think they have indeed to take responsibility for losing the elections. And what is striking to me is that Emmanuel Macron always wanted, through this at the same time narrative, en même temps, he always wanted to have in front of him as an opponent only Marine Le Pen and the Rassemblement National. Because it's the best possible opponent, It's the one which always loses in the second round. We have a two-round election system in France, both for legislative elections and for the presidential one. So in the first round, of course, you can have a very strong political base. But if you always lose in the second round, if you are unable to unite 50% of the people plus one vote, then you are in fact betraying your own electorate. And it's exactly what happened in these elections. The Rassemblement National had a very strong dynamic in the first round. And they came first. After the first round, all observers in France were expecting that they would win this election. But they failed. Why? Because in the second round, they are never able to unite people. Because they are not credible, because they didn't work, and we see it also in the European Parliament. Because in the end, you can't build a political offer only on the anger of people. Of course, I understand anger. I understand that people are feeling that the political class in France didn't deliver on many issues, on migration, on security, on the price of daily life. And many people in France are very much facing now this impoverishment of the country. But if you are only exploiting anger, in the end, it gives you, of course, a lot of space in the first round to come first. But you can't succeed in uniting the country in the second round. And this is the reason why, in fact, the Rassemblement National has always been the best possible partner for the left, in any case. Emmanuel Macron, in fact, continued the policies of the left in the past years. And he always wanted to use this machine that was, in a way, invented also by François Mitterrand, that you have the far right to be the pretext of your successes in the second round. So now it's very clear for me, since last Sunday we have a confirmation of what I always believed and what we are working on even in the European Parliament. The real force of alternance in France, the real alternative, is in fact the center-right. In fact, the rebuilding of a right-wing political force, reasonable, serious, telling the truth about the situation, refusing any kind of demagogy, and choosing to provide the voters with an alternative that is able to unite them in front of these policies of the left.
They call the new Popular Front, but actually the politics of Popular Front in France are quite old. I mean, I wouldn't mention the origins of that, basically a strategy of the communism in Europe. And it's always been a catastrophe because obviously that works for, that plays in the hands of the most radical, not certainly the most moderate. So the socialists are aware of that, that they have always paid the price of the Popular Front. They are always who pay to foot the bill of the Popular Front.
I think they are making a short-term bet, but this bet is a betrayal, and especially after the European election. In the European election, you know, this Popular Front, this unity of the left behind the far left was first created in the recent history in 2022, after the presidential election, where the socialist candidate received 1.5% of the votes. This was a historic low, you know, 1.5% in the national election.
The mayors of
Paris.
Of Paris, yeah.
So
and Hidalgo, of Spanish origin, yeah.
Of course.
Way, yeah.
So they decided at this moment that they would run for the legislative elections behind Jean-Luc Mélenchon and the far left. And of course, it was paid with a heavy political and moral price, if I can say, because the far left in France is now in a terrible political situation where they are, as I was saying, excusing political violence, fueling anti-Semitism, excusing also the separatism in the country, and putting in danger, this is common also with the Spanish situation, the unity of the country, the unity of the political community. Yeah, so the basic principles are at stake in this strategy. And the socialists decided to side with them, which was absolutely scandalous. In the European election, our colleague here in the parliament, Raphael Glucksmann, led a campaign to say, we will never do that again. Now we understood the lesson. We will go under our flag and we will defend our socialist line. And he received a lot of public esteem for this. Yep. And by the way, made quite a good result in the European election.
Yeah, he did quite well.
But then the snap elections came, and the day after the European elections, in only a few hours, they reunited with the far left. So it's a clear sign that, you know, socialists do not have any kind of moral political line, and this will be paid with a huge political price. I think when we look at the victory of the Labour Party in Great Britain, they did exactly the opposite. They decided to kick out anti-Semitism advocates to avoid any kind of radical agenda, even in terms of basic policies. You know, the Front Populaire was campaigning in France, promising 50 billion euros taxes more for this summer in France, which has already a world record in taxation. They are promising to kill the European Stability Mechanism Pact, so to destroy also this European commitment.
That's the economy.
It's a huge risk for Europe.
That's the economy, and we know that France has, quite a huge share of public sector in the economy, 59-60%. Huge debt, more or less like Spain, deficit, and that is a situation in which you have to to be careful to handle. I read this morning the editorial page of Le Figaro by Jacques-Olivier Martin, and he said, appliquer les programmes du nouveau Front populaire en suicide pour la France. Is that the case? But at the same time, Mélenchon has made it clear that he will apply to the last detail the program that he has adopted.
I think quite cynically he knows that this will not be the case. He's only pushing his own coalition to fail. He wants to push the socialists and the Greens to govern with Emmanuel Macron, so that at the next step he will be the only one able to say, I was the opposition. I think he's in a strategy of radicality, betting again on the chaos, and this makes it very dangerous for France. I do not see any chance that the program of the current Front Populaire will be implemented fully in France in the weeks to come. I think there is no chance for this to work because they don't have a majority in this direction. But the bet of Jean-Luc Mélenchon is to push the whole other forces at the left to compromise with Emmanuel Macron so that he can then, in the next step, show himself as the only alternative.
François, you took a very strong and very clear position when the leader of your party, COT, moved towards an agreement with Le Pen. You were absolutely vocal in opposing any kind of agreement with Le Pen, and that is very important, and that owes very much to resilience that has been shown by La Repubblica. But there is a global challenge for the center-right parties, how to rebuild our political offer. We got a good result in general in the European elections. I wonder how can interplay with the internal situation in France. Certainly, I'm sure there's going to have some important consequences in the internal situation in Spain. But now we have this fragmentation at the far right, AfD, Le Pen plus Orban, then Meloni. Then what do you make of it, and how you think this may affect the rebuilding of the center-right political offer in Europe, and particularly in France? Because I think that you're going to be far more visible in the current situation. You're going to have a strategic position with regard to the future of France. And I think that having shown this resilience, there is a real opportunity for La Repubblica to rebuild and to represent what I think will be an evidence for an increasing section of the French society, as it's happened in Spain, that you can be very strong, very tough, and at the same time very clear and very strong in defending the basics of the coexistence and the nation as a community. So, I mean, what are your thoughts about the rebuilding of the center-right?
My first thought is that this is a necessity. In the past years, both Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen wanted to tell us that right doesn't exist anymore. Right and left divide is not relevant, and that the new political spectrum involved to take a decision between the center and the extremes, or the populist and the progressive. I always refuse this mindset because I don't think this is right. I think that democracy implies pluralism, and that this involves that you have, we could get back on it more in depth because this would be long, but I think that in every Western democracy, we see the same divide, which is not artificial, between two, let's say, not only to worldviews or to sets of convictions, but to mindsets or to type of characters, and in this direction, what we need to rebuild in France, you spoke about our economic situation, our global situation now in France, I think requires that we rebuild a political force, governmental force from the right. An EPP line in France. And this is what you managed to do in Spain. And again, the reason why we admire you so much is that you went through this rebuilding process through the ideas, through the political line, political strategy. I think we have to do the same in our country right now.
I'm sure you're going to be able to do so and you're going to be successful. It's important for all Europe that France really works.
We'll
François,
be back.
thank you.
Muchas gracias. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias, François. Gracias.